Howdy, all. We've made a promise not to talk politics, especially after I got an email from an irate fan saying, if you talk about one side of the political aisle, you're pissing off the other one. So we're not going to talk about politics, but Jillian wanted to bring up something that sort of involved politics.
Yeah, it sort of does, and I think as sports fans, we will appreciate it. Somebody on a network, we won't say what network, so it's as to be completely unbiased, about a speech tonight to use a soccer analogy. If you don't knock it out of the park, you're in trouble. So that's just sad, because if you're talking about knocking out of the park in soccer, it's not really the right analogy. So it was a swing and a miss. I get it. So it's sometimes it's funny to see people try to make analogies in politics and completely miss. I know that we've all had some experiences with that. I know, Mike, you had said that you had a pretty interesting one that you remembered about a terrible analogy or a terrible swing and a miss with sports and politics.
Well, I mean, okay, there are some politicians who are legitimately sports fans. Like Rudy Giuliani is a Yankees fan.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember him, I think it was during the primary 4 years ago, that he said something that was like the cardinal sin for any Yankees fan. I think the Red Sox were contending for the AL East title, and he basically said, well, if the Red Sox win, I'm not that upset. Like they're at least in the AL East, and I'm like, are you kidding me? The Yankees fans hate the Red Sox with a passion. I don't care if you want to win the Massachusetts primary. You hate them. You tell them they suck, and that's it. You don't sugarcoat things. But he was, I thought he was a little weak. And the one thing I remember was John Kerry, who's now our current Secretary of State, 12 years ago was running for president against George W. Bush, and he was campaigning in Michigan and Ohio, and he had crossed the Michigan-Ohio border. And as we know, Michigan, they love their college football, and Ohio loves their college football. So he was in northern Ohio, and he said, "Go Wolverines," and got booed by the fans because obviously he was in Ohio and that was Buckeye territory. So sometimes these politicians, some of them are legitimately fans, some of them just say this to get votes, and you can sniff out the fakers all the time, Russ.
Although he's a big-time hockey player, he plays in a men's league, and he's been doing. I'm surprised he made that mistake.
Yeah, but this was, right, I guess. I'm just saying, sometimes they're sharp, sometimes they're not so sharp, and when they aren't sharp, you can really tell. So.
But I do think that I understand people's frustrations. There's so much with politics right now. It's funny, I tweeted last night, like, need a break, and I had a funny video of my dog, my pug, begging for food that I posted. It was in the middle of the convention. I was like, you want a break from everybody talking about it? Because I get it. I understand that people have platforms and they feel like it's important for them to have an opinion on it, and they have a platform. They're allowed to speak about it, but sometimes I think we all need a break, and that's I understand that too.
So after saying we're not going to talk about politics, we just talked about politics for
We didn't actually talk politics, though. We didn't say anything about one side or the other. We were more making fun of them, which I think people need a little bit of a breather. It's okay.
Okay, let's start.
Go ahead. That's the good thing.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, let's start the show. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Thursday, July 28th, 2016.
I'm Jillian Fisher.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Eklund is away for the day, and we'll come back tomorrow with who we'll talk about the best number. We'll talk about the best number and who the best number 7 is. I have my ideas of who that is, and he will probably put up the poll for who the best number 6. It's not Shea Weber. But I wanted to talk. There was some rather slow news day, but some things coming out of my city of Buffalo that I'm sure will be interesting and will be an ongoing story over the next couple months. And we're not going to get into guilt or innocence here. We're just reporting what has happened. The Buffalo News reported that...
Real quick, I want to stress that point, Mike, that we are not talking about guilt or innocence. Like, I really want to stress that because everyone becomes a lawyer when this stuff comes out, so I really want to stress that's not what we're doing. We are just simply reporting on what was said and what came out.
Right. Depositions had been revealed in the Buffalo News from 3 women in regards to the incident the night before the NHL draft involving Evander Kane. Now, the thing that was interesting about this was Evander Kane was a celebrity bartender at this Bartender on Chippewa, which is the street where a lot of the bars a lot of the happening bars are in Buffalo. And the depositions describe him, physically accosting and verbally, you could say abusing or verbally throwing things at these women, and them physically separating him from them. And this will be adjudicated. His lawyer and the charges have already been laid. But Russ, what I want to go to is the fact that, and we talked to Joe Yurden about this last week, after what happened in Winnipeg, which was not a legal situation, but it was a team situation, and now what has happened with him in Buffalo, I don't know whether the Sabres can trade him or get any value for Evander Kane.
I don't think they can. And again, someone from the team, they can't control the guy, but probably the worst possible situation for this guy to be in is that celebrity bartender situation. It's almost like making Johnny Manziel a celebrity bartender. Like, it's just, he's probably the worst guy in town to have do that. Now, the place doesn't care because they got plenty of press, right? So that's really all they care about. But right now, the Sabres are stuck with him. He's got a $5 million contract for like the next 2 years. He's underperforming a little bit to what everybody thought he would be. Unless they buy him out, no, I don't think anybody's taking him.
Now, Jillian, what I'm concerned is, okay, we don't know how this is going to end up. We don't know what the NHL, where they will go depending on his guilt or innocence. But either way, after this, unless some team is, willing to take him on in a trade, he's going to be in Buffalo. To me, this is going to be a really difficult such situation for the Sabres in terms of public relations and how they handle this, and how they handle him, and how they handle him as part of the team. And they brought him in as one of a number of players to take the heat off the young guys like Jack Eichel and Sam Reinhart. And now, I think he's not putting more heat on him, but the only thing he's doing is attracting more attention than those guys, but the wrong kind of attention.
Yeah, and it might seem like a tough PR situation because it is. It's difficult. You have to remember, yes, he is in the media. He's a player on a professional hockey league, but at the end of the day, he's a person who has family members who are probably concerned. This is a real person facing real issues. It keeps happening, and the league. Again, until there's charges that are actually placed or he's acquitted, it's tough for the league right now. They're kind of in limbo. We've seen this happen time and time again. They're kind of in limbo because you don't want to punish somebody who hasn't been charged, but you also want to be careful with any type of promos or promoting that player, because then all of a sudden what happens if charges are officially pressed and he is accused of it. So it's a tough spot right now in limbo. One thing that the Sabres could do is a small PR statement saying, we are aware of the situation, we understand the severity, we take these things serious, and once the legal case is completed or once the legal pressing is done, we'll readdress it then. And then if, depending on his guilt or innocence in the court of law, again, simple statements. I mean, if they're stuck with him, quote unquote stuck with him, maybe it's time to think about how the team can help players who are continuously facing these problems, who have drug problems. And I'm not saying this is Evander Kane, but we've heard of players with drug problems. We've heard of players with drinking problems. These teams, I mean, these players are under a lot of pressure, and they get put in the media, and there's a lot that the team can do. I'm not saying that's what they should do, but there's a lot that can be done And if they feel like they're quote-unquote stuck with him, you can make a difference somehow, and maybe his play on the ice would improve if you took some time to maybe, I don't want to say rehabilitate a player, but really invest in them.
Well, I mean, the only thing I can say from the Sabres' point of view is not that a good season will cure all, but if he goes out and he scores, and, you know, Russ, remember last year we made fun of the fact that I think he said he wanted to score or thought he could score 50 goals, and he ended up scoring 20 in, I think, 60 games. I mean, if you balance it out, he was close to 30 goals. If he goes out, stays healthy, and scores 30 goals, I think they could move him. I think that, you know, that would, even though they're the off-the-ice questions, I think some team would be more willing to roll the dice and take a chance and trade for him. Not saying that they would get a lot for him in return, but I think that some general manager, you always know that there are general managers out there who say, I can rehabilitate that guy, or I can see value in that guy. But right now, I don't think that's the case. But if he has a good year, I think that might be the case. What do you think?
Wait, is Russ
Russ,
still
are you there?
Have we lost Russ?
I think we've lost Russ.
Well, until Russ is back, I agree. I was going to say, I kind of agree with that. Russ, are you there?
Here, but let me see. I'm trying.
These are the perils of doing the webcast by your phone.
Yeah. I think he's muted himself now.
Russ, log off. I'll re-invite you.
Is he? Are we?
Oh, wait. Okay, wait. Yes, this is live podcasting,
Yeah.
live webcasting at its finest, ladies and gentlemen.
In the middle, you know what? Though sometimes in these moments you need a break, because these are tough conversations to have, because I mean, you don't want to just say a player is only what his play is off the ice, but it does matter, and sometimes you need a break for Russ to drop his phone, and it works out fine. I think he's frozen now.
I think he's frozen.
At least he's smiling, right? At least he's making a good face.
Which is a tough trick to pull when it's 90 degrees outside. So yeah. So I mean, well, Russ, if you can hear us, just log off and I'll re-invite you. Well, some other little news and notes. Defenseman Matt Carle, who was bought out by the Tampa Bay Lightning earlier this month, was signed to a 1-year, $700,000 a year contract by the Nashville Predators. Now, you know, Carl, I mean, if you go back to the days when he was paired with Chris Pronger, he was a pretty effective defenseman, and he got a nice free agent deal with Tampa Bay because of how he played with Pronger, but it was pretty quickly realized that the reason why he was good was because he played with Chris Pronger. You know, he's a decent second, maybe third pairing defenseman, and you know, I think right now he gets a chance to fill that Barrett Jackman role in Nashville, that veteran defenseman who will play on the third pairing and maybe kill penalties and things of that nature. But I think that's mostly what that signing was for. Joe, while we're waiting for Russ to come back in, let's touch on something I wanted to talk about, which was, you know, and this was earlier in the month, so this isn't exactly new news, but it was curious. Do we have you, Russ?
Maybe.
Yay! Russ is here.
Okay, let's just finish up the Evander Kane thing. My premise was that Kane is going to have a good year to be able to, for the Sabres to be able to move him and get at least something for him. If he can score 30 goals and sort of, you know, I mean, I don't think he can put the off the ice stuff behind him, but if he makes himself valuable enough that somebody's willing to take a chance on him, then I think they can move him. Otherwise, if he's going to be the off injured guy who has the off the ice problems and is inconsistent on the ice, then I think they're probably going to have to buy him out. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's true. You don't know what their buyout situation is. Like I don't know. Like like for example, like the Flyers now can buy somebody out if they want because they've signed X amount of players. I don't know what the Sabres situation is, but I don't think they would consider the buyout this year. I think they would at the end of the year, though, if they can't trade.
Right. I believe he has 2 years left, so buying out the final year, the thing is they may want to buy out somebody like Matt Molson, who, I mean, we know that he's declining in terms of his speed, and he's got 3 years left. So if they're going to buy somebody out, even though the buyout would be longer, at least they're getting results out of Kane. Now the funny thing is, they could expose Kane to expansion. Let's put that thought together here.
Oh, yeah.
Evander Kane in Vegas.
That's not good.
They probably wouldn't take him.
I think you're right.
I was gonna say I cannot see that ending well. It's like when the LA Kings seem to be another team that is okay taking risks on players who maybe have some off-ice problems, and it would be the same kind of thing. It's just the environment that's there is too much for a player who's had past issues.
Yeah,
No,
I agree with that.
Russ, I want to go down the historical road here because Sean McIndoe, or Down Goes Brown as he's known to on Twitter, who writes for the Hockey News, wrote about a few trades that nearly happened, trades that would have been blockbusters at the time, and they came close but didn't end up happening. And one of them involved the Rangers, and it involved Stamkos. Now, this was when, early on in his career when he was not being played under Barry Melrose, and apparently there was a deal that involved, it was like a 5-for-1, or two or three players from a list of 5 players, including Del Zotto, Ryan Callahan, Dubinsky, Dan Girardi. Just imagine what the Rangers would have been like if they had made that deal. The thing is, I don't know whether they would have been better, even though they would have gotten the best player, because guys like Callahan and Dubinsky and Del Zotto was a guy that left, but I mean some of those players were key players for them making the Stanley Cup final a few years ago.
They were, but considering one guy's left in Dan Girardi and his skills have declined, I think they would have done okay on this trade. I think Stamkos would have put them in the next level. Now, it might have taken them a year to sort of recoup and get other players up from the minors to play other spots. That may have taken, and so they may have not gotten to the Cup as quickly as they did, but they might have been in way better shape last year and this year and going forward. So I think they'd have been okay. I wrote an article literally like 2-3 days before Melrose got fired on how he's not playing Stamkos, he's not playing him on the power play, and I remember talking to Melrose post game, and he was just thrilled that he had his line of 40-year-olds or older. He had a full line of them, and he just loved those guys, and he talked those guys up to death, and I just was shaking my head like he can't get fired quick enough.
Yeah, I think Gary Roberts was one of those guys, and it made no sense. It's like, you know that an 18-year-old kid is going to make mistakes, so you just live through them. Like, for example, this year, Austin Matthews will make mistakes. He's a rookie. He's an 18-year-old, 19-year-old. I don't think Mike Babcock is going to play him on the 4th line. I think he may start him off on the 3rd line, but very early he's going to be a top 2-line center, and he'll make mistakes, but he'll learn from them. A couple of the other... Go ahead, Russ.
Player.
We didn't hear that. Just say that again.
I think he'll make a few less mistakes than Stamkos because he's a better all-around player. He just won't score like Stamkos could.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Now, a couple of the other trades that were discussed in this article, which I thought were pretty interesting, Corey Schneider, when he was with Vancouver for Gilbert Brule, apparently Doug McLean said that this deal was offered by Dave Nonis. Now the question is, what is the more stupid of the two? Offering Corey Schneider for Gilbert Brule or not accepting it as soon as it's mentioned?
Yeah, you know what? That's a good point when you think about both sides of that. Oh, wow. I think offering it, because at that point, maybe I'm going to go with this. At that point, you didn't know that. No, you kind of did know, but I think offering it for that little bit. I think for me that's the worst. That would be the worst end of the deal.
Now you have to understand is that they had Luongo at that point, so Corey Snyder was a luxury. He was the young.
How long was Luongo there after? Like how many years?
Luongo was there until 2014, I believe. So
Was he?
Yeah, so he was there until 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Russ, Corey Snyder was blocked by Luongo, so, I think Roulet is from the Vancouver area, isn't he?
Yeah, but he was a star in juniors. Like, nobody knew he was going to have the injury that he did, which totally derailed his career. He had a load of talent, so I could see why there was hesitation from Columbus's end. Again, Schneider was already a world junior goalie and was already tremendous in college, so he already did have a pretty good track record, but was just blocked, like you said.
Did they say why that deal didn't go through? Just curious.
It said McLean and the Blue Jackets turned down Nonis's offers.
They turned okay.
And then they ended up trading Gilbert Brule to the Oilers for Rafi Torres instead. So not exactly a wise choice, but hence the reason why Doug McLean is on Sportsnet now. Okay, another one of the deals was now I don't remember this one, and I don't remember. And Russ, since you cover the Flyers, maybe you heard this one. Claude Giroux to Tampa for Paul Ranger.
Yeah, I kind of remember this when the Paul Ranger stuff was getting hot, and all of a sudden it looked like he was going to be this tremendous defenseman, but I don't think they were ever really close.
What year was this?
This was... Go ahead, Russ.
I don't think that deal was ever really close.
Okay. And I think it says around 2007 or 2008 that this happened.
Giroux was still like he wasn't even.
Yeah, he was a
prospect. Probably, yeah, right. Yeah.
He was probably in the AHL at that point, or just playing with the Flyers. Ranger at that point he left Tampa Bay in 2009 for whatever reason. We still to this day don't know what the reasons why he abruptly retired early in his career and then came back a few years later. But that would have been a bad one. Finally, this one is something that I'm sure you've probably heard, Russ, but this was around 1994, and there was supposedly talk of a Mark Messier for Brett Hull deal.
I don't remember. I could see why it wasn't made. I thought you were going to bring up Wayne Gretzky and the Phil Esposito era because he went to get Gretzky, and actually the team turned the deal and they didn't want to add the salary. This deal I don't know about.
Okay. Yeah, it's the first I had ever heard about it, but the maneuvers with Keenan. Because Keenan went to St. Louis after he was with the Rangers. That he won the Cup, and then wasn't he? He was gone the next year. Colin Campbell took over as head coach, right?
Yeah, he faxed in his resignation.
It sounds like
he actually faxed in his resignation the day of the parade.
That's sort of an homage to Phil Collins, who faxed his divorce to his faxed the note that he wanted to divorce his wife. One Toronto one that I was told by Bill Waters on one of our podcasts. Apparently, the Leafs had a deal in place with Tampa Bay to get Vinny LeCavier very early on. Like this was, I don't remember what year it was, but this was when the Leafs were. I assume this was around the early 2000s, 2001, 2002, and they had a deal in place. And I think Rick Dudley was the assistant GM in Tampa Bay, or the GM, and ownership turned it down. So it was close, but it never came to pass. And just imagine, Vinny going to Montreal would have always been a problem because of the whole Francophone thing. But Toronto, I think it would have just been another, like another Sundin. Imagine Sundin and LeCavier as a 1-2 punch up the middle.
Sending back.
He never said who, but I would, looking at that team at the time, I would assume that it was probably, guys like it could have been the Caberlet and Antropov. They had all these guys, young guys who other teams. That was the package that was always talked about in a Lindros deal. Was a first-round pick, Caberlet, Antropov. It was always these young guys. The only 3 young guys that were on the Leafs roster. But
one about Dudley, he's a sharp talent evaluator. So if they didn't put the right guys in the pack, that's why he turned it down.
Right. Okay, couple notes from the American Hockey League that were a little interesting that I thought were, this was earlier in the month that they announced some rule changes. One of them is sort of esoteric, but after, me watching so many games from my youth and now as an old guy, and when I was young, the home team always wore white. And you would see teams come into Buffalo or come into Toronto, like the Red Wings or the Flames with their red jerseys and all the different colors of uniforms. But now, the way the NHL does it, the road team is always wearing white and the home team is always wearing dark, which it's pretty boring. You always see that road team wearing white.
Right.
The American Hockey League for next year, I don't know if this is going to be permanent, the first half of the year the home team will wear their dark uniform. The other half of the year they're going to wear their white uniform. So there's going to be a little bit more of a feast for the eye for fans who will get to see different. I would like to see this in the NHL because I liked those days where the different team would come in and wear the different jersey instead of seeing them all white. Jillian, what do you think of this? Because I think it's a good idea by the age.
Well, and see, I grew up with hockey with the uniforms from all I can remember, I should say, is the home team's always in their colors. So that's very different for me. But that said, it is kind of nice to think about, you don't always see the same jersey every single time. You always see the one boring, the white jersey. So it'll be nice to have a different flair really going on to it. And it's very different for somebody like my age. Maybe when I was really young it was different. And I know third jerseys were always really big. And that was the only kind of color or difference that you had with the home team jersey. I do like that they're splitting it half and half. It kind of introduces it slowly, see how it works, see what people feel about it. It'll be interesting, and maybe for people who want to see the other team's jerseys, it helps with marketing them too.
Russ, I think this would be something that the NHL should do because honestly, I think you've got fans from our generation who remember the home team wearing white all the time. And
I don't know how it's going to do in the AHL, but I think in the NHL it could have a bigger impact because obviously sales are bigger. But there must be a reason why they do this now, and I guess the biggest reason is they probably figure that the home teams, they don't want to sell a lot of white jerseys. Like they want to sell their best jersey, and so if they play them, I guess in front of the home crowd, they want to wear their best looking jersey. That's really what it boils down to, and I think they probably sell more jerseys that way. You might be more enticed to buy a road team jersey coming in now because it's going to look a lot better. So I think that's probably the reason, but I don't know.
See, I always bought the road jersey because if I spilled something on it, the dark color would hide things.
You're like me. I spill myself all the time.
Except for that jerk in 1999 who threw the soft pretzel with mustard on my dark Leaf jersey. I'm still gonna be white.
I'm the same as you. I have one white jersey. That's it.
Yeah, I know. It's impossible to keep clean. I'm not Pigpen from the Charlie Brown comics. It's like it's tough to keep a white jersey clean. You bump somebody and so. Especially
if it's like a bright white, not like a off white. When the bright white, man, it's like you walk around in the city and it's dirty because it's just what happens sometimes.
Okay, speaking of jerseys, John Shannon from Sportsnet posted on Twitter the top 5 selling jerseys, and I'm assuming this was for last season. And I was shocked that Connor McDavid was not in the top 5, especially since, usually new player, rookie year, first overall pick, usually you would think that somebody who's a hot rookie would be one of the jerseys that would sell the most because everybody's anxious to get that jersey, but the top 5 listed were all established players. So okay, I'll give you a one guess who the number one was.
Crosby.
Thanks, Jillian.
Sorry, I was like, I know this answer, even if I don't. I was like, I want to get in on it. I don't know a lot of these fun facts. So.
Okay, there are 2 Russians on the list.
Ovechkin. Okay, I'm sorry. I'll let Russ go.
That's fine. Obviously, Ovechkin is one. I'll say Malkin's the other.
No, Vladimir Tarasenko. I was a little surprised by that one.
Is he the cover of the NHL cover?
On the EA Sports?
Yeah.
I think he is.
Yeah, he's the cover, so that had to have helped. I'm sorry, that had to have helped.
Maybe. Number 3 is Patrick Kane, which is not a surprise. Number 5 was a little surprising. Former Art Ross Trophy winner, leading scorer in the last few years, just signed a big contract, Russ.
Former Art Ross.
Just signed a big contract
literally in the last 3 weeks. He's one of the highest paid players in the league now.
Oh, Ben.
Jamie Benn.
Ben, that's right. That's a good one.
Yeah, so Crosby, Ovechkin, Patrick Kane, Vladimir Tarasenko, and Jamie Benn. If I hadn't seen the list, I probably would have guessed, obviously Crosby and Ovechkin, but I don't think I would have gotten Tarasenko and Benn.
I thought Malkin would be in there.
Yeah, me too.
So did I, but I mean, that's a little surprising. The other thing from the AHL that was interesting, and we know the road that professional hockey is going down. It's a road that I don't particularly agree with, but with concussions and with everything else, fighting is going the way of the dodo bird, and the AHL is trying to legislate fighting, or at least rampant fighting out of the game. What they're doing is they're basically saying if there's a staged fight, like the puck is dropped and right afterward there's a fight, it's a 5 in a game. They're not going to that's a staged fight, you're out. So what's going to end up happening is probably these guys will drop the puck, skate for 10 seconds, and then drop the gloves, so they don't get the game misconduct. The other thing that's happening is after 10 fights, it's like for the 11th fight, a fighter will get a game suspension, and then for every fight after that, they will get a game suspension. So it looks like, Russ, that you're going to have a lot of face rubbing, shoving with gloves, a lot of extracurricular stuff, but not as much dropping of the gloves as we're used to.
I mean, that definitely affects the AHL more because they still have a lot of career fighters. In the NHL, bring up a guy, have him fight. You could even bring up a guy and have him fight every time the Flyers play the Rangers, and then you'll worry about it in that last game if he gets suspended because he's not really a part of your team, right? I think that's going to be the way to get around that one. And as far as the other one, the more you cut down fighting, the more the stick infractions will go up. That's a guarantee.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, we've seen those infractions climb every year, and to me, I don't know what is more dangerous. To me, I think stick infractions are more dangerous than fights. I mean, I know that you're going to have these incidents where like Sean Thornton and Brooks Orpik, where a player's head gets drilled to the ice and he gets concussed, but other than a split lip and a black eye, most of the time fights. That's all. I know that, I won't get into the concussion debate because we can't quantify how many fights it takes or whether that has a long-term detrimental effect. We don't know for sure. But
I mean, the only thing I can tell you that I've talked to a lot of players and I've taken seminars. Unless your head hits the ice, you're probably not getting. You're definitely not. Guys like Dave Schultz, they don't have CTE. They're doing fine. They also didn't take the tremendous hits in the corners. Those cause a lot of problems. Mm-hmm. Those hits in the corners on the glass are terrible. So unless you're hitting your head, yeah, these fights aren't long enough lasting. I don't get horrible concussions. Now, again, if you were a career fighter in the 80s and 90s, then it changed because those guys were getting bigger and heavier. So I think that's a part of it too.
And it's like the role of the enforcer is no longer you don't have that person on your team who you identify as that's their only purpose anymore. That's not. I have somebody whose role is to get under the other player's skin, and maybe you know they'll drop gloves if needed, but they gotta be contributing something else too.
Well, it's funny because I was talking to a friend's son a couple days ago, and he's a big hockey fan, and he thought I was lying when I said that, in my lifetime there were players who played in the NHL without helmets. He couldn't conceive of players not playing with helmets on, with face guards on. And I'm like, yeah, and I pulled up a picture of, Gilbert Perreault, and he's like, wow, he was completely blown away that a player was not wearing a helmet. And, I remember back to the day when, who was it? Craig McTavish was the last guy who didn't wear the helmet.
Yep.
It still looks a little weird to me with everybody wearing helmets and everybody wearing visors. So I guess I'm just old. Jilly, good.
So I was going to say, it kind of also reminds me a little bit. I was thinking of players that represent their teams, and I know like we were saying like enforcers and whatnot. And I saw a fun little thing that was going on where people were debating what player most well represents their team. And so I came up with a couple of teams. I made sure it was no teams that are personal to us. And the first team, I wanted to see what you guys thought of what player most well represents their team. It's a team that's had a very interesting offseason, which is why I picked them, but the Florida Panthers. What player do you think most well represents the Florida Panthers?
Russ, you go first.
I'm torn between two. I'm going to go Aaron Ekblad, though, because I think at the end of the day, that's really the identity they want to have. And so I think because he's a young, good-looking guy, Florida's a lot of young, good-looking people. He plays a good defensive game. It's a defensive league. I think he's the guy.
Sounds like I should move down to Florida. I'll go the other way. And I think Ekblad is, he's a cornerstone of that franchise, being a former #1 overall pick. But I think, in terms of goal scoring, in terms of attention, I think Barkov is going to be his rival. Maybe Ekblad has a leg up on him because he's a North American kid, and Barkov is from Finland. I don't think Barkov has any kind of serious language barrier, but he's an excellent player, and he's going to be their catalyst up the middle. For, if they're going to win a Stanley Cup, it's going to be with both Barkov and Ekblad. So I think they're going to act in tandem, but I'll say Barkov.
Yeah, the only thing he doesn't have is the Ekblad hair, so that's what he's missing. That's really, really important one there, guys.
Not all of us don't, Yeah.
Another team that's had this one people may not think too much about, but they've had a very interesting offseason. Carolina Hurricanes. What do you guys think?
I'll go this one, Russ. And the thing is, they're a team in transition. If you were talking last year, you would have said Eric Staal, even though Eric Staal is aging, but now he's gone. I don't think his brother Jordan is that impactful as a player. I'm going to say Noah Hannafin. I think Noah Hannafin is they're a top pick and played as an 18-year-old defenseman in the NHL, which is a difficult thing to do, and I think he's going to be sort of like Ekblad, their linchpin #1 pairing defenseman for the next decade at least. So I think he's going to be the player that they build around.
I'm going to go Jeff Skinner because he's the closest guy to Ron Francis himself, and fans love him, and I think they've gotten past the concussions and maybe the willingness to trade him because his play is just as good as it ever was.
But they keep wanting that. I swear to God, you will hear at least 3 Jeff Skinner trade rumors this year. You know that you will because they always come up.
I saw somebody also make an argument for Falk, another interesting one.
Yes, very very good defenseman. But I'm looking at that team as a rebuilding team. Mm-hmm. Falk is a now player. I don't think they're a now team. I think they're a team that's a few years away. Falk will be part of this, but I think that the key guys are going to be Hannafin, Elias Lindholm. Those are going to be the cornerstones of the next few years.
So do you think that that player that represents the team could change for them, or do you think that it will change, or is the player that's who it's going to be in 2 to 3 years?
I mean, in my opinion, I think it's going to be Hannafin. I mean, I think he's a centerpiece of that team. I mean, if Skinner does get traded or if Lindholm gets traded, then things can change. But right now, as the team is currently constituted, I would say Hannafin is their centerpiece going forward.
I still think it's Skinner. I think, what is he, 27? I mean, he's not that old.
No, he's not. He's not old at all. And he's going to have to take a leadership role now that Stahl is gone.
Yeah, and the Hurricanes they've had a very interesting offseason. They've made a lot of moves that I think are really going to help them in that, they're saying they're in the rebuilding time. I think that they should be a team that people will have their eye on in the next couple of years. Another interesting one, St. Louis. What do you guys think?
Russ, you go first.
I'm going to say Tarasenko. They think once Hitch is gone, there won't be anybody yelling at him anymore, and and he is one of the 5 or 6 best players in the league. I just think he's gotten to that point. He's a definite leader on the team, and I think he's the guy.
For the sake of being different, I'll say Alex Pietrangelo. I mean, I agree that Tarasenko up front as a scorer and as a team, this is a team that traditionally over the last, I would say, decade has had trouble scoring. And Tarasenko being a top offensive guy is extremely valuable. But if you looked at what Pietrangelo did in the playoffs, he was playing 30-plus minutes, and he was matching up against the other team's number one offensive line. So I think he's just as important as Tarasenko, so I'll say Pietrangelo.
One other thought on Florida, we could have said Jágr because there's a lot of retirees down there, and he's pretty close.
Yeah, though, Jágr is also just really, even though he's not probably there, he hasn't been there his whole career and whatnot, he's a player that draws attention, man. Those fans of Jágr travel. They travel. I mean, when I was at an Islanders-Panthers game in New York, I saw people in a Panthers jersey, and I was like, "Oh, did you guys come from Florida?" And they looked at me like I had 6 heads because they were not from America. They were from the Czech, and they were like, yeah, like they had no idea what I was talking about. And when you look on Instagram, man, these people travel and they see him, so he brings in a lot of fans, so we might have overlooked Jágr there. And
one thing I can admire about him is he's immune to blackmail, especially
and remember, there's also the Jágrs. There's like 6 of them now, or 7 of them probably.
Yeah, the traveling Jágrs. They are fantastic, too. So maybe we should have reevaluated. I mean, I love the players that we picked, but Jágr might be a better choice just because he also brings a certain charm to him too. Like, he's just not, I always say he's not human anymore. You can't think Jágr is human. He's playing the way he is, and at his age, you're just, how is he doing it? And he'll post pictures where he's working out at 1 o'clock in the morning after a game. It's a crazy man. We'll do one more.
Okay.
Let's do the Ottawa Senators. They just
I think it has to be Erik Karlsson. Norris Trophy winner, center of all their offense. The thing is, though, and what's going to be interesting under Guy Boucher, that team doesn't have any problem scoring, and Karlsson's a big part of that. But for them to be a playoff team, they're going to have to play better in their own zone. And Karlsson, I can't criticize him too much because he's lugging the puck all the time, but defensively, in terms of covering when some other forward comes in, he's an offensive defenseman, so he lacks that ability to be a shutdown guy. And I think that's a negative of his game, but to me, Russ, he's clearly the most important guy on that team.
Yeah, and if there's ever a drop-off or if he's injured for a length of time, I'll go with Hoffman because I just think that Boucher is going to rely on him tremendously. I think he's going to fit in that system well, and he might even score even more than he did last year and in the future. And so if he does live out that 5-year deal, it's possible at some point he might take over.
Okay. Good show, guys. We're going to cut it short a few minutes today, and we'll be back tomorrow. Eklund and Russ and I will be doing a show at 1 p.m. and then doing an exclusive show for our Patreon patrons. Remember to go out and visit patreon.com/hockey if you want to be give money to keep the program going and feed me in the next coming months.
We don't want that. We don't want to do that.
No. I need to lose a few pounds. That's right. So screw that. Okay, for Jillian Fisher, for Russ Cohen, I'm Mike Agello. Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.